Welcome to the Lindsay Hadley podcast show. I'm coming to you from the North Shore of Oahu, where weekly I interview some of the world's most inspiring people from business, philanthropy, and entertainment. I love collecting humans, and these are some of my favorites I've found along the way. This podcast is brought to us by Capita Financial Network.
Do you need help with the next steps of your financial plan? Think Capita. Capita is a financial network built around you. They have a team of financial advisors, CPAs, estate attorneys, Medicare providers, and Social Security experts to help you accomplish your financial goals. Call or schedule a complimentary consultation at 801-566-5058 or visit their website at capitafinancialnetwork.com. You can also check out their financial education podcast, The Financial Call, available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and YouTube.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Lindsay Hadley podcast show. Today, we have a very impressive guest, Hooman Radfar, who has a very diverse background in finance, in business, as an entrepreneur. He's both operated, ran, and founded companies, as well as been an investor, not only as a managing partner and founder of Expa, which has been a part of some incredible bets and businesses over the years, but also he is an early investor directly into companies you've all heard about, including Uber and others. And we're really excited today, Huma, to have you on and talk with you a little bit about your remarkable career and learn a little bit from you as an entrepreneur and investor. You have a wealth of knowledge in a lot of different verticals. So maybe we can start off by having us hear a little bit about you. Like, what was your journey to get where you are? I mean, again, seems like you're like the Midas touch, where anything you've been a part of has had tremendous success. I'm sure that you've had failures along the way, because everyone knows entrepreneurship and business is a high contact sport that is wrought with peril. But I'm really excited to hear a little bit what got you where you are and a little bit of your journey. Feel free to take us on that a little bit. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a long story, but we'll start at the beginning. So my family, I'm an immigrant. So I was born in London and grew up though in Pennsylvania. So I'm a Steelers fan. So if that's an issue, let's get it out on the table right now. Grew up in Pittsburgh.
No issues here.
No issues. Okay, great. My parents both ran their own offices. They got divorced when I was younger. And I always saw them working hard. I always saw them be very independent. And I was technical. My parents and my dad in particular was always encouraging us to like work with computers from a young age. Like I was coding since I was like 12. And after I finished graduate school at Carnegie Mellon, I got into the startup game. So I started my first company and I haven't looked back. So I've only been doing either building startups or helping invest and advise startups for, the last 20 years.
That's amazing, Hooman. So you started out coding super young, and this was like what time was that in the 90s? I mean, I'm guessing your age now.
Oh God,
me.
I'm old. Yeah. So yeah, I guess so.
Early on.
It was early 90s. Yeah. So I'll put it this way. I remember when the first browser came out that Mark Andreessen wrote. I think it was Mosaic, and I remember HTML1, and I remember building a web page when there was you could count the number of web pages. That's like where it was.
Insane.
So
that's insane. I know. I think about that all the time. Like I remember getting an email, and they were like, "There's this thing called emails." Being like, how is this going to be used? This instant, ability to communicate. So fascinating. But I'm so excited to hear a little bit. So you're an immigrant, grew up in London, and your parents were both successful entrepreneurs. Where were you guys originally from? Tell me about your background.
I'm Iranian, and my parents are both Iranian, and they left. I want to say it was like right as the revolution was starting in 1979. So my father would kill me if I didn't say it. So he always makes sure they didn't flee the revolution. They were leaving anyway. So we were in England, and then I was born. And then after, I guess I was old enough to be moved, they went to Pittsburgh because my uncle and aunt had been there before.
And so early on, you fell in love with computer software, tech, you understood it. in a way that would have been first to the trough, I think, again, because it was being created while you were being immersed in learning. So what was your first like major entrepreneurial step up to bat, initiative? I mean, you're currently the CEO and founder of Collective, which I'm so excited for you to share a little bit about that today on the show. But what was where does the impetus of you start as putting on your chops as an entrepreneur?
I mean, it's interesting depending on how far you want to go back, but my first official like real venture-backed company was AdThis, which we sold to Oracle. But my first project and what kind of got me thinking about really genuinely starting a company was Netflix and movies. And so when I was an undergrad, so I guess I'll release my age here. So I went to college in 1998, and I love movies. Like I love movies. And I used to go to Blockbuster. For those of the folks that are listening here that are old, remember Blockbuster, you'd go rent your tapes and DVDs, and that was it. But like they had this thing, late fees, right? And I was the worst. I would like not rewind, charge me, not bring it back in time, charge me. So I'd racked up like $80 or something like that, which for me at the time was like really bad. And then I went with my girlfriend at the time, and they wouldn't let me rent the studio unless I paid it. And I flipped. I mean, I'm younger at this point. And I'm like, this is not going to exist. And I'd gone to college. And at that time, if you remember, so there was dial-up was the predominant way that you accessed the internet. So it was incredibly slow, like 56K. But if you were in school, they had high-speed internet. So it was like everyone was using like Napster and all these tools to like steal music, steal movies. Like it was like crazy time, right? This was like, everyone was terrified of the internet because everyone in the content space thought this is it, like piracy, like how are we going to stop it?
The world's over.
The world's over. And nothing could be further from the truth at this point, right? Like everyone's gone to legal subscription services, and it's super highly regulated, which is what they all wanted, obviously. But so what I was thinking of is like, well, if there's going to be a way for us to watch movies online, and eventually it's not just going to be computer, but there'll be connected devices. And I started looking at alternatives, and like the only thing that I could find was Netflix. And there was this company, and it was this like small little startup on the West Coast that it was like, you could rent DVDs and they'd send it to you and you could hold them longer. And so it was like, wait a minute, so I got to wait a couple days for this DVD, and then I got to send it back. And it just seemed like a hassle, you know what I mean? And I'm like, this is it. This is Silicon Valley's best like a company that's cool. Anyway, obviously they came out with streaming later, but my friend and I wanted to build a streaming kind of service, and found a paper from Bell Atlantic about how you could stream video over DSL, which was like the predominant transport mechanism at that time. And we started making that company. Like we didn't know how we were monetize it, but we're like thinking it'd be like $3. You pay for kind of more like if you have Comcast or something like that, where you pay for the movies, or Apple TV. That's kind of what we were thinking, which is a model, right? There's also now streaming and all you can eat. And that was what we did. So we worked on that, and then the bottom fell out. And so like we started building out the initial technology. And then I remember I was working with a professor, and he's like, yeah, so this is over. Nobody's going to fund startups, let alone kids out of school. You're going to have a lot of trouble getting a job. You got to go to grad school. And so that's what drove me to grad school, was like the end of that project. So I wouldn't even call it a failure. I would call it an idea that never even got seeded, because we didn't even get to fail.
Well, what a visionary to see that ahead of headlights. Like that's so fascinating. And it sounds like maybe is that one of your gifts? Like, have you ever taken the Strength Finders test on Clifton? You ever taken that, where you find out a little bit about your core strengths as a human being?
No, I should do it. No,
you should totally do it. It's a great book, but basically has a concept in it that, a lot of times in our culture in the West, we focus on all of our weaknesses and we try to improve upon them. We actually like kind of celebrate the Rudy Rudebergs of the world. He's the guy from Notre Dame, Rudy. And like, here he wasn't very naturally good at football, but he worked so hard, and then he got like 2 minutes in, and we celebrate that, when actually research shows the book gets into this longitudinal study that we're like built with innate giftings as individuals. And you can see it as young as kindergarten, and you track it 20, 30, 40 years out, and the same core natural propensities and skill sets are there. So the argument is triple down on what you're good at and just make up for your weaknesses by partnering with the right, co-pilots and entrepreneurs and partners, or hire the people that are good at what you suck at. Because if you just stick to, what you're good at, you're going to become phenomenal, because there's that natural propensity and wiring, especially if you enjoy it. And so, yeah, they go into, and then in the end, you take a test and find out what your strengths are. And it's all about the utility of your strengths. And one of them is visionary. And I'm sitting here just hearing over and over again what your thinking is, and looking at your resume, and I'm like, gosh, maybe that's one of yours. But do you think you can see things before anyone else does? Are you able to like envision what will be on the horizon before anybody else? Because that makes for a great investor.
I'd say on average, I haven't had a lot of difficulty understanding where things are going to go from a technology perspective. I'm generally like, it hasn't been the hardest thing for me. I think the challenge that I learned was that's not enough. So I'll give you, a crude approximation, like 1% maybe of people can really start to see where things are going in a particular domain. I don't proclaim to know everything, where everything's going to the world, but then, these particular areas, I feel like I just spend so much time and I'm so passionate about it. And I've started to kind of hone an ability to see what's going to happen. But then 1% of those people can take action on those and create opportunity from it, whether it be create a company to capitalize on that opportunity, which is obviously very hard, or even make an investment. And that's difficult, right? So it's like 1% of 1%. That's the people that you see that can have this outside success, because it's difficult, right? Like knowing where something's going to go isn't enough. What if you know and you bet on the wrong team as an investor? What if you know and you don't deploy enough capital, or it's timing. So I would definitely say it's a valuable skill set, and one that I think I've gotten better at. It's kind of something like my friends joke around with me about. I've even had like people poke fun at me at like wedding speeches and stuff like that. But yeah, I wish that was all it took. I wish that was all it took.
Well, it sounds like you have either learned or naturally, again, have some other strengths, because you've obviously had the Venn diagram of whatever else it took, because you've had so many great successes. So you sell your company. How old were you when you sold your company to
Oracle?
Well, yeah.
How old was I? It was 2015 we signed the deal. So yeah, 2015 was announced, 2023. So 8 years ago. Yeah, I was like 32, 33.
Okay, yeah. So that's really young to have a big exit like that, and to it's every entrepreneur's dream to like experience the fruits of their labor. How long did you build the company? Was the company until you had that sell from founding?
We got our first, so we raised our first venture round in 2006, and then money hit the bank, 2016. So it was 10 years and then
10 years
for the company. Yeah.
Yeah. Incredible. And
yeah, we had the recession was what dragged it out. And blip of 2008 to 2011 was very challenging. I think everything got hard. A lot of companies, a lot of my friends struggled through that as we did, but made it some dents.
Hooman, I love that you acknowledge that some of it's timing and luck. Like some of it is stuff out of our control, because every entrepreneur I've ever known who I end up really respecting as a mentor, they always take that into consideration of like, hey, you have certain things that are in the locus of your control, and then there are just things that aren't. And all you can do is just white knuckle the things that aren't. But everything else you actually can do your best, to implement sound thinking and practices and good decision making. So tell me a little bit, after that, you then went into to investing through a fund, and tell us about Expa. Was that kind of your next thing? Is like, okay, I'm going to start investing more, and you started out doing direct investments and then led to a fund itself. Maybe tell us about that journey and how different that was from going from a founder operator to now picking, betting on jockeys and betting on the horses yourself.
So Expa is pretty unique for a number of reasons. So the founding partner, Garrett Camp, was the founder of a company called Stumble Upon, and that's how I met him. So when the social wave happened, so you had, Facebook, Twitter, there was some large outcomes. There were so many companies that were competing for that. One of them was Stumble Upon. And it's interesting because he sold it made a lot of money at the time and sold it, I think, for 70 million right away, and then bought it back much more cheaply from eBay, ran it again. Second time didn't work. And and then during that, he founded Uber with Travis. That worked, obviously. And so, he wanted to build a company to build companies. He wanted to be the hands-on partner that we didn't get. Because coming up, like, he was technical, and, a bunch of our friends were more product-oriented, technical people. And a lot of the venture community came from like banking or consulting and whatnot, who was, in the cohort that was advising us. It's ironic because the original venture folks, there was quite a few operators. Like, you look at Sequoia, you look at like Don Valentine and these guys, like they'd had like John Doerr, even like from Kleiner, all these guys had did work. Like, they had operating experience. But when the .com happened, or as the tech bubble happened, the first one, they were growing really quickly, these funds. And a lot of people, they hired the Harvard MBA and all that. And I'm not sliding those people. They just, when you're in the Series C or Series A, some of the decisions you need to make as a founder, or some of the training that you need, they just didn't have the reps on that.
Right.
And so that was kind of what he was thinking about. And he was like, well, I want to be the partner that we didn't have. And we can build companies, like we'll like actually incubate them, and like we'll work on them with them. That was how it started. And then we started doing more investment. And then that's where I kind of played a larger role over time. And I spent most of the time before I left investing through our funds. So our last fund was about 200 million, which they're still deploying.
Incredible. How many deals do you think you ended up looking at, or have you? Now you have a family office. You are now co-founded a new company, which we talked about, Collective. But have you just seen endless deals?
Thousands.
And thousands. Okay. So
easily.
So I'm thinking so many of our listeners have investments, are founders, co-founders, are operators, and C-suite executives inside of businesses. What do you think? Are there any kind of, like, in your case, because it didn't seem like you picked a vertical. I mean, you've invested a lot of different companies. Maybe you could talk a little about your investment thesis, and also, like, what are things you look at? What are some key things? Are there any, like, top level, like, oh yeah, the minute I see this, it's interesting, but these are some flags as well as an investor. Any insights you can give would be just incredible.
I was more general at the beginning because I wasn't sure, where I wanted to apply myself. And there was just certain areas I wanted to learn, frankly. I think there are some things that I was very, and I continue to be focused on. So it depends a lot on the stage. I spent most of my time on the earliest stages. So seed A, I've done some, special purpose vehicles and whatnot for later stage companies as well. But that's not where I spent the majority of my time. I'd say, look, you always look at the same variables ultimately when you're looking at a seed or A deal, and you want to see, like, what's the problem that they're solving? What's the solution? How big is that market and the TAM? What execution do they have to date? And then who's the team against that? Who's gonna get there? And then ultimately, when I look at those things, what you do in the earlier stage, and you just weigh the team like way, way, way higher. Because when you look at the problem in the solution space, the probability that they scope the problem correctly, and the solution that they're envisioning is like correct, and the go-to-market is correct, it's pretty close to zero. It doesn't mean that they're wrong on all those things, right? They may have like one of them right, or even two of them right, but there's usually some issues. So if you over-index on the team and the market opportunity, you tend to have a better outcome. Or I tend to see, like, I'm more excited because you have more room for error. Because, like, they're great, like an insane team going after like a really large opportunity, like when social was coming out, right? Like, no one knew what the right social network looked like and all that, or whatever. Then you have a lot of room. Now, if you take a great team put against a small TAM or like a really small market, their freedom to operate is constricted. If you take a mediocre team against a large TAM, they're going to get smoked by like someone else, right? So I'm not suggesting the product and the actual solution itself and the go-to-market don't matter. It's just they don't typically have that much execution by the time in that early stage. You get a little bit more. And so you start to, again, weight those variables. As you get closer to Series C, Series D, you weight those variables much more heavily, obviously, as you have more data. So I would say just exceptional team. And I think a mistake that a lot of operator founders make that we made that I don't make anymore is, you'd say, oh, well, this is a great idea. This is a great team. They've got all these good aspects. But to your point of kind of the strengths, like, oh, well, if we just help them with this one thing or these two things, they'll make it. I don't know, sales, or they're not product people or whatever. And I learned the hard way, I think we all did, that you have to evaluate the business as on its merit and the person's merits. Like, you have to be like, okay, no, we're dead, right? Like we're or let's say we don't put the money in. Do you think this person's going to get the money no matter what, independent of us, right? Are we the only check? Are we the only believer? And is this person have the resiliency and the skill to figure it out and crack a code? And that's that. I mean, we could spend time on this, but that part of like that leader, the founder, I look at that a lot now. And that psychology of the person in the early stage, because it's critical. There's a lot of common patterns you'll see among great founders.
Wow, I've loved this insight. I mean, like, it actually resonates with what my assumptions are, and having not looked at thousands of deals and not being, in your shoes, just from my own anecdotal experience. My mentor, he actually, he sold his business in the 90s and had a decent amount of liquidity, and he was the greatest options trader who ever lived. And he actually hired the top analysts in the market to look at qualitative data, which in clusters became quantitative, about the character of the CEOs of publicly traded companies. So we're talking way later stage. We're talking about public companies, and the leadership mattered so much. In fact, only about 1% of the 2,600 companies that they did this analysis on had what you call like high character qualities, like where they cared more about, other people than themselves, where they kept their word, where they had, corporate social responsibility framework that was core to their wiring and DNA, how they treat their secretary, how they treat their spouse, their beliefs, like their world paradigm about humanity, all of these things. They could see these things, and it would indicate, hey, here are leaders of high character. And the assumption was they're already high capacity to be in a position of a publicly traded company, as a CEO. And so what they did is they bet on those companies and outperformed the S&P and the Dow by 30%. It's called the Missouri Fund. So it's pretty cool that, like, what you're saying is, like, I really look at the founder and the DNA of the person, the people, because I'm thinking about, I've heard the story about Airbnb where they pivoted from a bed and breakfast cereal company or something into the tech platform they became. Because I always find those who have high character, they'll pivot and they'll do the right thing for shareholders and for the market, because they're not interested in their ego being fed. They're interested in just making the right decisions. And so I love that you said that. In your experience with, founding companies yourself, have you ever ran into people who just like, yeah, you'll never win, and, you're never going to make it, but we believe in you? Have you ever had anyone do kind of be on the other side of that table where somebody's like, I think you're gold, I don't know about your idea, that later you were able to work with them in some capacity because they valued you over maybe the concept?
I've seen that. I have not had it for anything I've worked on where they're like, I mean, I've definitely been part of conversations where like, oh man, this founder is amazing. If they're working on anything else, I would do it. That happened a lot, like in the crypto wave that recently happened. For example, I would hear about that, but I haven't had that happen to my face. Maybe people said that they would work with me on something else. Especially this particular concept, it's resonated, I think, for the most part with venture community, which is something that I wanted for the next business that I did, because you don't do things to raise money, but you most certainly have to consider the cost of capital when you're going to do a business, right? So, if it's like SpaceX, for example, like that guy knew when he was starting that company that it was going to be a slog. He's not going to make any money for, God knows, 15 years, and he's going to build a rocket, and it's going to cost a ton of money. And so there's a lot of narrative storytelling. And by the way, the pool of investors for the first round of that are, and so, but that you're going into that eyes wide open. That was something that I went into and said, I wanted something that had a broader pool of capital. I didn't want that to be, a limiter with this particular business. But like entrepreneurs, it's tough because your job when you're investing is to try to beat the averages, right? And create a portfolio, which, it has an outsized return. But ultimately, when you look at someone who's going to create a company, I think that the profile, there's some similarities with people who are late stage in public, but the real thing that psychologically I think is distinct is, you hear that term chip on their shoulder. It's whether you call it that or something, there's got to be some, I always try to find, is there something driving them that's, going to keep them resilient and going to keep them moving forward in the face of adversity? Because, going from 0 to 1, like you're creating something from nothing, it's incredibly high energy and it's difficult and it's not that fun. It's like building a company happens between press releases. It's not that like glamorous, And so the people who see it on the outside, who see that one article or the fundraise or whatever, wow. But like the days in between that, they're just thankless. It's like looking at a dashboard with this number's up. I'm going to call this, like, it's just lots of that. And so you have to find that resiliency. And so, I mean, it's interesting. I'm starting to find some common patterns that I think, I'm not suggesting every entrepreneur has, but it's like pretty crazy how much these entrepreneurs have had some sort of tolerable trauma in their past. And I find psychologically that's, so for example, divorce, adoption, immigration. So like 40% of the Fortune 500 companies are founded or run by children of immigrants. If you go look at like very famous entrepreneurs, Jeff Bezos, adopted. Larry Ellison, adopted. Elon Musk, divorced immigrant. Like, so the hypothesis that I have that I'd love to kind of do more research when I have free time is this like a common trend among a lot of these entrepreneurs? Because I observe that. And immigration is one too. So what the idea is they have enough trauma that it's painful, and then but it's tolerable. They create these defense mechanisms, they create strength and resiliency, but that carries them forward in the future. That's their basis of resilience. And that's how they get the chip on the shoulder, so to speak, right? But if they have an intolerable trauma, like let's say for God forbid, and you wouldn't wish this on anyone, like, you have an immigration and I don't know, you're torn away from your parents and you can't survive it. So they have to be able to get over it and be strong. And then you see this like really, really intense strength, because it's not normal to be starting a company. It's not normal. Like running a company after it's grown is it can be the same person. It doesn't have to be a transition. But like, if you tell me who's the best person to run my company when it goes public, there's probably someone who doesn't have my background who could do a great job too. But I wouldn't put that same person in the seat when there's 3 people.
Right. 100%. It's I love this conversation, and you've obviously thought a lot about it and you're articulating it so beautifully, but it's interesting because you mentioned Elon Musk, and I saw an interview where he talked about the CEO founder types. They usually get the amalgamation of all of the worst problems in the company coming up to them. So it's really intolerable, painful work. Like you're usually, everybody else is competent, is handling the things that are solvable. You get the most painful, hairy problems on your desk. And usually by the time it escalates to you, it's an emergency. So it's constant triage and the kind of psychological framework, like it's really unpleasurable. So you have to have a different why you're doing it, because the work is so psychologically painful and brutal. There's so much psychic pain in it. And I just thought that was so true, and later when it ends up building a system where it's just,
I think there's a point where, like, in particular, once you reach profitability, where there's like the creation of the system and there's the optimization of the system. So there's a period of innovation. And again, every company should be innovating all the time. Look at Apple, and like the great companies are always innovating. So I'm not suggesting it's over, but there's this period that it's not like you're dead if you don't, like, you're figuring it out. It's like you're buying your right to live. And there is like an outsized amount of work. And so, during this last wave, there was a really large discussion about work-life balance in startups and how it was in a healthy environment and whatnot. And my counterpoint to this is how can you build something, with 3 people that should take 10? Well, you just spend more hours, right? Like, and so I think that, it doesn't mean that people who have the work-life balance shouldn't work at a startup is just pick your stage more properly, or like pick a different role, or maybe wait till it's like not a startup even sometimes, because it's just not for everyone, and that's okay. But I think if you want to have growth in your life, you have to accept this like concept of tolerable pain. Growth requires pain. It's like, I use the gym analogy a lot. If you're going to the gym, like you literally, when you're like lifting weights, you should be in pain. You get sore, right? If you're not, you didn't have a good workout. So that's tolerable pain. And the result of that over many, many repetitions over multiple days and years is that you would be healthier and stronger, right? But it's pain actually. And that's the same thing for your mind. It's the same thing for skill set. Like you have to be uncomfortable. What you call discomfort or pain, that's the startup in a nutshell. And I think you can't say you want to have growth and then not be willing to be uncomfortable, in my opinion.
So, Hooman, this is a perfect segue into talking about Collective, because why, after all your financial success, would you go back into all that pain of starting another company? Is it because you wanted to grow more as a person? Tell us a little bit about Collective and share with us your new venture.
Collective is it's interesting. People ask me why I do it, and I guess it depends on what day you hit me. In part, there's always got to be some personal reason, right? I think, and then there's a larger reason. So for me, I wanted to personally learn and build a company that was at a higher level of skill than what I did before. And I wanted to solve a problem with an enduring solution, right? I didn't want to just like have something, sell it, make money, and then move away. So I was looking for, I was intrigued by this concept of like, okay, there's these some markets that are massive and they require like a company to be alive and just huge to solve it forever. And an insight that I had while I was at Expen, I was investing, is I really enjoyed being a founder, helping other founders, using my experience and helping them hopefully manage the challenges that I had faced. And also I learned a lot from them. I mean, of course, these founders were better than me at certain points, and some of them were worse than me. So it was good. I think it was a good cycle. But like the level of scale that we have in venture, you think in hundreds, and that's if you're lucky, you get to invest in hundreds of companies. That's like a low growth stage. I think, maybe some who do Series Bs, they might invest in 20, 30 their whole career, because you just pick one or two a year. You do that for 10 years. I mean, that's it. And so I missed the scale of my first company, right? And operating in a problem at that scale, solution, thinking in millions. I mean, we had insane at one point we were seeing 10% of all the Google searches in the world through referral traffic. I missed having a team. So from a sports analogy perspective, like I look at venture like track and field, and I look at like operating, like it could be like football. So track and field, like I ran a track. You run 100, you run your race, and then everyone does their own stuff. They're all over the place. You don't know what they're doing. At the end, the score, and it adds it up, and then you're like, okay, cool, we won. That's like a portfolio model, and it's good. You get to be independent, but like you're not really working together. In football, for example, or even basketball or any other sport where it's just like more dynamic, you can have a great quarterback, but if no one's catching what he's passing, like you're kind of screwed. Or like, a lineman misses his block, quarterback's dead. And a game can turn on a dime. So I missed that. I just missed that. And in Collective, I saw this opportunity to kind of hit so many things that I was thinking about. The largest group of founders in the country are these businesses of one, right? These solopreneurs. And many of them are just themselves, like a realtor or a lawyer who hangs up a shingle. My parents, both psychiatrists, had their own office. Some of them have some contractors, maybe one or two employees, but that's 36% of the businesses in the country.
Wow, I didn't know that.
40 founders. Yeah, and so
are a sole operator in an LLC.
Solopreneurs, yeah.
Wow.
And so when you look at it like that, it's okay. There's a massive opportunity to help businesses move forward, but these are underserved people. Like I, as a venture-backed founder, have a larger opportunity. Like Ashton Kutcher will call and invest in our company, and I can text him. He's not going to call my mom and be like, "Yo, what's up with your psychiatry firm?" Like, I love Ashton, but he's not going to do that. And so that's the difference. So we were thinking, how can we help these people move forward? And the way we're looking at it is ultimately time is money. right? Most of these people, whether they bill on an hourly basis, project basis, all boils down to time is money. Psychiatrist, a realtor, whatever. So can we give them time back and save them money? And that was basically our goal was, how can we help these people focus on what they love? And we say passion, not their paperwork. And so what Collective is in a nutshell is it's an online back office solution, and it's geared towards, to start, higher income solopreneurs. So what we had learned quickly was, if you're making 100K in net income, and many of your listeners probably know this, but all things being equal, you should probably strongly consider an S election for an LLC or, a corporation, because you can save $10,000 a year on taxes. We have members saving $50,000 a year on taxes with an S election, but it's not free. You have to do all these things when you're an S corp. The administration is heavy. You have to have do your books every month so that you can do quarterly taxes every, and then you have to do your annual. It's not free. And so we're like, oh, okay. What if we say to you that $10,000 and then we do that work for you and you pay us a subscription, and that subscription should be materially lower than the amount you save, right? And that works. We think that's a logical person should want to do this, right? Because you're going to have to do some version of taxes and whatnot, right? You have to pay your taxes. It is what it is, unfortunately. And so that was how we started. And, it's been working really well. We have, thousands of member businesses now, and we will form their company for them, or take over, and help them, do an S election. We'll set up their books and do their books. We'll set up do their payroll, and then we do quarterly taxes. And
I've had my own boutique consultancy, and in fact, I'm sitting here going, man, where were you? But I also am like, I should still
call us if you ever go back.
Yeah, right. And I was like, we still have the company open, and I use it for special projects, because speaking of film, I actually am now a film producer, and making films, and so I use it for different aspects of that. But that's so fascinating. So tell me a little bit about how you found these entrepreneurs. How do you access them? What's your marketing strategy as you're now a B2B essentially?
Yeah, it's interesting because our customers, while business owners and business leaders, they're ultimately what we call prosumers, right? They act like consumers, right? They find and discover products much in the way that you and I would discover a product for a new phone or whatever, right? This is the higher consideration purchase because it's, your finances. And so most of our marketing efforts to date have been successfully focused on cracky consumer channels like Facebook, Instagram, Google, member referrals, things like that. So things that you would consider typically consumer tactics are what we've been doing primarily. And it's been working fairly well.
That's incredible. And where is your company in its stage of growth? How far along is it? Have you taken venture capital money?
Yeah, we've raised about $80 million from pretty leading venture capital firms. So General Catalyst, QED, which is the leading fintech, Expo, of course, invested, and we have a number of other folks I had mentioned who are great individuals and companies that have, from entertainment and small business, and leaders from these different places, like the founder of YouTube, the founder of Patreon, things like that, to help us advise.
Oh, that's incredible. So was that your Series A that you raised that much? You're saying that's how much you've raised in total of the life of the company?
That's how much we raised in total.
Okay. And so where are you? Did you take a Series A, B? How far along are you?
We have raised 3 rounds.
Okay, cool. And was your hope to go public? Was that the trajectory? Who might acquire you? Where's kind of your exit strategy? Because somebody like you would have all that probably thought through.
I think when I was younger, I paid more attention to an exit strategy. Having sold a company and then been on both sides of transactions now, I've bought 2 companies, and I don't plan the exit. I think what you have to do is you have to build something materially valuable and, create the most value you can with the dollars that you take. And you can help increase the probability of exit opportunities, right? So you should definitely invest time with potential acquirers, but, ultimately, through partnerships and through discourse and whatnot, because, for example, with Oracle, I believe we had 3 partnerships with them before they bought us. And they just knew our business so well. And it made so much sense for them to buy us at that time. And I often tell people, like, you don't want to sell your company. You want your company to get bought. And if you sell your company, you have a much lower exit than if it's bought. So like if you're doing really well and you're hot and you don't need them, but that other company sees value, you'll get a premium to, hey, I'm selling my company. Here's a banker, and they run a process. It can be a huge difference. So we don't have an exit plan that is for our investors that is acquisition based. I hope that our last financing would be a public financing, because I think the market is massive, and this is we could build a company like an Intuit or a Shopify that's a platform where these folks can congregate and get their things done.
Oh, I love that you're thinking so holistically, because there's got to be so many applications of what you guys can do for this market. So tell me a little bit about, do you do any philanthropy? Like a lot of our listeners care a lot about, causes, and you've been helping so many entrepreneurs. And I mean, the private sector solutions are such amazing ways to make the world better and lift some of our greatest societal ills. But do you have a cause that's close to you and your family office focus on, or are you involved in anything in terms of like the give back world?
There's a lot of, we haven't figured out, our perfect strategy. I think many of your listeners will probably identify with that. I think often it's, what do we care about right now? And we're active. So, we've donated to, for example, my wife is, Ukrainian, and we did, a big campaign around Ukraine and that, we've done, we're supporters of code.org, which is, trying to democratize access to programming. It sounds like pretty technical and dorky, but the idea is if computer science is like one of the highest paying, ends up being one of the highest paying jobs, and it's a very fundamental skill set in the world of AI, it should be like as basic. Every high school should teach it, but it turns out some high schools don't have the curriculum, they don't have the tools. So they've done an excellent job. I think now it was like 50% of schools now have coding as a mandatory requirement in their schools. And I think they got a petition from I think the only one in history where 50 governors signed and said like they support that every state should have coding. And it's like math kind of thing for competitive advantage as a country. So so we're kind of all over the place, I would say. But I think there's no shortage of things to do. And I definitely want to invest more time in being more like focused. But for now, it's been, things that we care about that are near and dear to like, myself, my wife, and like that's kind of what we've been doing right now.
That's really cool. I'm so glad to hear a little bit about that. So, I mean, as you've been on this journey, and now that, it's really cool to hear you say, I'm not thinking of an exit in mind. Maybe there's so many different ways this can grow into whatever it'll be. And it sounds like you really enjoyed the football side of it, right? So you don't want to get out of the game anytime soon, and you're still really, really young. So do you have children, or you said you're married? Do you have kids, and you involve them in any of, your business endeavors and things?
I don't have children yet, but next year that will not be the case. So after February, I will be joining the ranks of my friends as a parent. So we'll see, I guess. We'll see where I'm at when she's older. But, I was talking with a friend about this, and he asked, what are you going to do? We were talking about this whole concept of drive, chip on the shoulder and whatnot. And I really don't think that's meaningful for me to have to work with, I want our kids to be actualized and resilient. I think it's more important, if we have 2 kids or 1, but, but our daughter for sure, like, what do you love to do? What are you good at? And then how can you build like a sustainable life? That means your income is more than your expenses, where you're actualized. Like whether you are worth $1 million or 10 million or 100 or 1 billion, like I have so many friends that are billionaires at this point, and I have friends that are worth 100 million, like in the tech space in San Francisco. It doesn't matter. Like if you enjoy, I enjoy what I do. I think we meaningfully are going to help a lot of people. I'm not naive to say like, I'm not curing cancer. I'm not doing things, but like I'm helping parents get home earlier. I'm helping put money in their pocket so that they can send put braces on it. Like their real life. That's great. Like we're moving their lives forward, and my team can move their family's lives forward, and I can move my family. It's like a really fun alignment. And so if that's like what my kids want to do, great. I would love to like show them. And if it's not, like, great. Just be actualized and be resilient, because ultimately, you're gonna live your life every day there. Like your parents, my parents wanted me to be a doctor, and they supported me, of course, when I didn't at the end, but at the beginning, they were like, "What are you doing?" You know. And I know a lot of my friends' parents who pushed them into a profession, and they took that advice, and you got to live with it every day. So, yeah, I hope she's actualized and resilient and independent, just like super independent. That's my
Yeah.
goal. The money
Huge
stuff will come.
congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's so exciting. It's the best. I have 3 boys, and it's like the treasure of this life, just like having this little person that you're so besotted in love with, and they make the quality of life. I mean, it's biological. Like they make your life better. That's why we do it, because it's a lot of work, but it's just so joyful. They bring so much joy. So I love all of this background. Is there anything that, when you invest or mentor, or maybe even as you're developing your own talent on your team, are there kind of some, I don't know about platitudes, but like key things that you're like, hey, these are kind of tried and true things that if you remember this lesson or this coupling or this phrase or this thought process, these are some pillars of which I've operated by that you like to pass down, that you might share one day with your beautiful daughter?
Just in terms of life, or in terms of work.
Yeah, life, work, either or. Anything where you're like, man, these are just some real gifts. I learned this early, like, or I along the way I had this incredible realization, like what you talked about like, you kind of had, you're seeing there's some similarities in founders, and there's similarities in, how you follow patterns for things that are coming on the horizon. And but is there anything where you're like, these are kind of just a capital T truths as a human being that I try to like really embody or share, on my journey?
Quite a few, but I mean, like a couple that I think are good guideposts. I think first and foremost, and it's a truism because a lot of people know it, but I think there are things that you can control and the things that you can't. You can't control like the war in Israel. You can't control the stock market. You can't control if an investor yells at you, right? But you can control how you react to that. Your decisions you make a result of that. Control how you communicate. And so focusing relentlessly on, your inner sphere can really help you a lot, because that's ultimately all you have control over. And making sure that you live, in alignment with principles and values, like while you're doing that, and just making sure that, like, I don't have to think about, like, if something happens in my company, I like think through like my values and principles and make the decision based on that. I don't have to, dance around it, and having firm values and it is really important. It helps you as a human being. You just don't have to think as much, and it makes a better lifestyle. And I guess honestly, the golden rules is really where I kind of find the most there. If there's like one core thing, it's so easy. Like, you be kind to people, right? Be truthful, like all the things that you would want from someone else. And so it's kind of very basic for me in that regard, right? So if you can, I try to take an attitude of continuous improvement too. I think a lot of people, myself included, like, you want things to be perfect. They're not going to be perfect. And so having this concept of, I'm not trying to be perfect, but I'm trying to have continuous progress at a good pace, and taking this very long view on life and yourself. I don't look at collective is not perfect. But we just keep iterating, and you can do the same thing with your life. Take just the progressive improvement. You always have room to expand, and it's an opportunity. Like something horrible happens, it's an opportunity. What can I learn from that? What can I grow? It makes life a lot better when you don't look at everything like, you're SOL because something bad happened to you. It's like, okay, well, what am I going to get out of this? I can practice patience. Someone's yelling at me. I can practice resiliency. I have to do a lot of work. Like, there are opportunities to practice those values. So yeah, that's kind of some of my basics.
I love those. Those are all wonderful. And just kind of wrapping up with our last question, it's a little more open ended. Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners about how to maybe get involved, or something you're just like on your mind, like, man, I want to, communicate this today? Is there anything else you want to share?
I guess I'll just share one, just given the climate. I think everyone just needs to take a breath and give each other space and space to be human. I think we're all polarized so much these days. And I think social media, our consumption of it, I don't want to blame social media, we're consuming it. And all these things are making us forget what makes, like they're highlighting the differences because that's how those systems work. That's how they make money and creating anxiety. And I would just focus on what's bringing us together and similar. Like we're very alike. At the end of the day, we all just want to be happy. We raise our family. We want to have like good things happen. And if we take a breath and focus on the things that bring us together and just give people a little bit of room to maybe say something that doesn't make sense, yeah, it's okay. Like I think everything's gonna be okay. So I know that's a little heavy way to end, but I just think it's critical that people just let people be human beings. Like there's no sides. There's one side. We're just all human beings.
Oh, that wasn't a heavy way to end. That's a dream. That's like music to my heart. We need to have these conversations more, right? Such a profound thing to end with. And thank you so much. I mean, like there's never been a time more that in my lifetime where I've seen just like, such us and them, such pitted against, such dehumanizing happening. And the inability, I've always thought to myself, what really makes humans human is our ability to hold things in paradox, that things can simultaneously be true and not true, that there's gray, that there's nuance, that things are incredibly complex and we can hold those truths. And I think as we're dealing with whatever it may be on the political horizon, the financial horizon, the belief systems, can we hold space and hold people in their totality and see ourselves in the other? So I love what you said there. Hooman, thank you so much for coming on the show. You're just so inspiring. I'm so grateful there are people like you that have used your gifts and talents to impact so many people's lives. And I'm so excited to learn more about your services. I literally think I'm going to become a client like tomorrow. So it's so fun.
Great. Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Thanks so much.
Do you need help with the next steps for your financial plan? Think Capita. Capita is a financial network built around you. They have a team of financial advisors, CPAs, estate attorneys, Medicare providers, and Social Security experts to help you accomplish your financial goals. Call to schedule a complimentary consultation at 801-566-5058 or visit their website at www.capitafinancialnetwork.com. You can also check out their financial education podcast, The Financial Call, available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and YouTube.